Hey, what's going on, everyone? So in today's episode of Cash Flow Veteran, episode 2, I'm going into my health journey. And I did want to start a little bit from an organizational standpoint, from a bureaucracy standpoint, to kind of criticize some of the things that have come out about people's health, people's livelihoods when it comes to what they're putting in their body and what has been recommended and suggested. So that was originally my intention, and I certainly was able to scale down what I was having to say. I ended up making 2 videos, basically. One that was my health journey, and one that ended up being a rant and rave of a lunatic about the bureaucracy of a bunch of other stuff, which included insurance and healthcare and a whole bunch of other stuff that in reality I think is important to talk about, but didn't expressly really get into the health side of the journey. Towards the end of that video, it really started kind of moving in that direction and got going on the USDA, the FDA, the food pyramid, all that stuff. So that's still in there. So I took out the other one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make a separate episode that is more of the Liberty Corner. So every month I'm going to be doing a Liberty Corner talk where I'm just be talking about certain things I'm specifically learning about libertarian philosophy and how that interacts. So that can be a book review, that can be listening to different lectures, going on a YouTube binge of famous libertarians as well, watching their series or other items that they've put out. I'm also part of a couple different classrooms that actually go through a lot of history from a libertarian perspective as well. So those are the topics, and I am going to relate them specifically to what I am talking about. So that's why I'm still going to keep it in. Just keep in mind, it's going to be a little bit more about the healthcare system and insurance to begin with. But I will actually be delving into those topics much later on, because those also dovetail into what I'd want to do for a monthly topic in doing interviews with guests that are doing things in that vein. So with that, enjoy this episode. It's going to get into the bureaucracies that talk about food and your personal health activities, personal health habits. And then it's also going to go into my health journey overall. And then I hope you enjoy the other interviews that are going to come along with that. With that, this is John, and I hope you enjoy episode 2. FDA, DHHS, USDA, in my opinion, from what I've seen, have oversaw one of the greatest health declines in history. Just ask some of the questions from their guidelines, okay? Which is better over the years, margarine or actual butter? Is breast milk better than formula? Are grains the foundation of a healthy diet? If you look at the food pyramid, which turned into a different pyramid, which is now a plate, you look at the different incentives that have come down. I mean, just believe me, I'm sure I'm forgetting all kinds of recommendations that have flip-flopped over time, and it could be that they're learning the better things from the good science that's out there, right? But not to mention that some of these organizations get public tax funding and also make money from fees. So they get to charge on a private basis, but also collect fees. I'm thinking of the FDA. Now, these are fees for things that they need. So I think it's almost 50% or over 50% of their money actually comes from private industry in order to do that. While individual people I'll assume, have the best intentions to help people and be great public servants. So again, the military members, anybody in the healthcare industry, like the intention of these people are good. And I think for the majority of the people, they're there to make a difference, and they take pride in making a difference for people. However, the incentives that run the organization, in my mind, are what are immoral and unethical, because of what they take away from other people in order to exist in the first place. But there's no amount of intention that these people might have that can overcome the structural incentives from the government. Once you create that government entity, it doesn't lend itself to fixing its problem to where it's not needed anymore. There's one reason for so much flip-flopping. This is one of the reasons that it takes you and me as individuals to learn how to educate ourselves about what health officials, what nutritionists, and what brands are trying to say and where they're getting their data from. At the end of the day, you will have to get to know your body, because no one else is going to be able to tell that better than yourself. Now, you can lie to yourself in a lot of ways, and a lot of us do, but as we become better, as we improve our personal economy as cash flow veterans, one of the things I want to encourage you to do is to really think about what your body is doing. Food is the fuel for our ability to achieve our dreams. It's the fuel for us to be able to lift the weights and to get in shape. It's the fuel that gives us the capacity to learn, to focus, to do all the things. So that is one of the biggest foundations of being able to be an extremely productive person. And I think anybody can tell that, whether at times you've taken large large sums of alcohol in your intake, or whether you have eaten a whole cake by yourself, or eaten nothing but garbage food. You put it in, and that's what you get. I mean, you are kind of what you eat. You end up being lethargic. You have other issues, and the more that you continue to do that, and one of the things I don't think people really understand is food is a drug. I mean, it changes your hormones. It has an impact on your emotions, on how you feel throughout the day, and not just from a body fatigue perspective, but also just from mental fog and everything else. I mean, food has that much of an impact, but it does it in little doses, like micro dosing of chemicals and biological agents that are put into your body, which is why it's so important to get the fuel right. And not everybody is the same. So you have to get to know yourself. No one else will know you better than yourself. And you have to be able to learn to get honest and truthful about that with yourself as well. And that's especially true when you're really starting to pay attention to what you're putting into your body, just like we've been talking about. So my health journey started in college. I mean, honestly, everyone's health journey starts way before that. I was super active, like I said, growing up. I played, in high school especially. I went from basically football to soccer to track throughout the whole year. And then I had church softball and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I was always gone. I mean, like I said, I was literally gone from, 6:30 in the morning to almost 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, did show choir and dancing and all this other stuff. And I was all over the place with it. I was in the choir. I tried to do everything. Maybe not the best strategy that's out there, but I certainly tried as much as I could to be as involved with everything. And part of it was I was bored. Sometimes I just hated the summers because I was just there, at the house just doing stuff when I really could be out, going other places. So I was always out of the house. It was just one of those things growing up. How I became really conscious of what I was putting in my body, how I was taking care of myself. Really, that all started in college with my track coach. He was an Olympic coach. And twice a year, he always sat us down and talked about healthy eating habits. He had some practical advice on what we ate day to day and what to do when we're actually getting ready for a competition. Actually, turns out carb loading doesn't make a lot of sense, or at least it only makes sense in certain aspects. So it's not always the best thing to do, depending on what type of athlete you are. So maybe for some bodybuilding competitions, to balloon your muscle capacity, to look huge, obviously you carb load before something like that. But one of the things that I ended up learning through that process was, your muscles and liver can only take in so much glycogen. So when you take in other sugars, your body will convert it to glycogen, and it stores it in the muscles, and it stores it in your liver. And actually, in order for you to really lose weight at some point in time, in order for you to start really burning fat in your body to use fat as you're losing weight overall or changing your body composition, one of the things that has to happen is that dietary ketosis, where you have to deplete the normal amount of glycogen that's in your muscles and especially in your liver. And until it actually comes out of your liver, which when you're eating it, depending on what you're eating, will typically get filtered through your liver and fill your glycogen stores there first. And then after that, it'll start filling your muscles. But again, that's not always true. It depends on what you're eating. That's also why children, specifically babies, I got a 11-month-old, almost year-old right now. One of the reasons why a baby can't sleep through the night and why they have to get up and feed is because their liver isn't big enough and they don't have enough muscle capacity to store the glycogen that they need. So they actually get hungry because they've burned out all their glycogen and they need to keep growing because of how fast they're growing. That's how much energy that they're using in order to continue their growth spurts that are there. It's why the children that are underfed tend to not be as big. They need to not to fill out. They don't grow as tall. So the glycogen stores are very, very important from that aspect as well. So that's something that I kind of want you to keep in mind. But it makes no sense for a lot of people who think that you need to carb load. Well, it makes no sense to keep filling up an already full gas tank, which is why your body transitions to fat storage for saving that stuff for later when it can use it when your glycogen stores get depleted. So that's why overeating is such a bad thing, is the glycogen, that sugar, gets stored as fat for future use. So some of my coach's general advice, was to avoid partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, high fructose corn syrup, basically all the Franken foods or the Frankenstein foods. Wanted us to generally stick to whole food as much as possible. Now, at the Air Force Academy where I went to college, I didn't have that much of an option. They had, a big contractor that came in and fed everybody, breakfast, lunch, dinner. So there wasn't a whole lot I could really do other than making sure that I was, getting enough protein or whatever the case might be. But there's often packaged type stuff, your Choco Tacos or Rice Krispie treats or anything else. Obviously, people needed that to, continue going. Especially there was a few people that I knew that were hypo or hyperglycemic. I can't remember which one, but they were just constantly eating, and it was like candy bars or like some of the thinnest people I've ever seen in my life. But they just had that where they just had to constantly be eating. But, I tried to be as aware of it as possible and try to stick to as many whole foods as I could while I was there. So that's why immediately after college, namely because I came from that contracted, food service where I didn't get a whole lot of choice in the matter for what I was eating. Basically, I could eat what was there. And, I became obsessed after college with looking into better eating and cooking habits because I did the majority of my cooking. I think that's true. And one of the interviews I did with my sister, and that's one of the things that we talked about was after college, it's like, okay, well, now I got to feed myself. I got to do adult things. So what am I putting into my body right now? I can't, going out to eat every night gets really expensive real quick. So what is it that I, need to do? And you meet other people, you start learning how to cook for other people, see what other people are doing as well. I was also trying to build my bachelor resume, which I always encourage people to do, or bachelorette resume. Being able to cook for somebody else, I think, is a huge bonus, especially cooking healthy meals for other people. I think is always a good skill to have, that you can impress that significant other you're looking for in that early 20s. So I bought a really nice set of pots and pans. I paid like $2,000 for these, and I still got them today. I mean, this is, over 15 years ago that I bought these suckers, and they are awesome. Waterless, greaseless, and you don't have to use any of that. We use some of it occasionally, but you certainly don't have to. And it cooks phenomenal meals and cooks it up to a point, up to 180 degrees and below 210. Basically, it kills off all the, 99% of all the bad stuff, bacteria or any of that stuff, but still preserves the amount of nutrition. Because obviously, once you start cooking more and more, cooking at higher temperatures, you actually start degrading the nutrient content that you have. And so it's a way to kind of keep it in there. Anyway, little factoid there for you. So I bought pot and pans. I started getting, picking up books, looking at different documentaries and stuff that are out there. Again, you should always take those with a grain of salt or any other dietary advice. Really just kind of look at it for yourself. So when I took some of the things as gospel, as a lot of people do, it's hard not to. I mean, you get excited about something, you see something that has a result for you, and you kind of buy off into it, and one little thing may work for you, but then you buy off on the whole thing. And unfortunately, that's just kind of part of most of kind of the human experience, and why we kind of need to pause and take a look back and really kind of analyze what they're saying, try to go to some of the sources, why it's such an important skill for you to actually be able to dig into some of that stuff too. So I highly encourage you to be able to learn how to actually do and conduct research, where it comes from, look at what the downsides of some of their stuff are. That's why I like sales and marketing, because then you can kind of see the hype that comes from it, or the propaganda that you might be exposed to. You can actually start seeing in real time what people are trying to say to you and what they're trying to seed into your mind in order to influence you, whether that is a politician or a company or a salesperson or marketer, whoever that company or person might be. It's something for you to be able to actually consider and to look at, which is very, very important. Again, learn how to really dig into any peer-reviewed research that's out there. Read any of the popular books, the blogs, the articles. Just being able to really kind of read, listen to their story, but also kind of look for the evidence that might be true or false out of that as well, and decipher for yourself what you believe to be most true. And you're kind of the guinea pig, and you should be the guinea pig for yourself to understand, hey, if I drink milk, how does this make me feel? Well, maybe I should not drink milk for a month or 2 months, and then introduce it back into my diet and try not to change a whole lot of other else, just to see what it would do for you. And there's some surprising things that I did with a recommendation that I have for you, and that we'll get into a little bit later. You should absolutely also be looking at any publicly funded research with as much skepticism as your Netflix documentary. Just keep in mind that anybody taking government money or anybody doing that, they still have financial incentives in order for some of that stuff to come out. Just think about what the food pyramid or food plate or whatever it is, those companies that are trying to get that are trying to get the seal of approval from government agencies in order to be able to use that in their marketing are going to have to play ball when it comes to some of that. So that's something to think about. And as much as people have great intentions, I don't think people's intentions can overcome the financial incentives, even if the financial incentives or the power incentives or the influence incentives come from government agencies or other places. I'm just generally skeptical of anybody trying to take more power from you. And certainly the government institutions are places of power. I don't think that that's a controversial thing to say. I'm sure someone will take issue with it, and that's okay. One of the reasons I loved being stationed in Montana was the access to grass-fed farms where I could actually meet the rancher and actually see how they treated their animals. Became part of a co-op where you could actually go slaughter your own animals, which I also think is important if you're ever going to do that. I mean, it's shocking to me, and I can understand why many vegans are kind of repulsed by that idea. But it also kind of shocks me that people who, they'll go buy a steak from the store without ever thinking of what the last things that happened with that animal beforehand. It's why I enjoy hunting. That's why I have a large respect for people that, ethically use their farms and take care of their animals, but also treat them with a dignity and respect, even at the end of their life when their life force is giving rise to other life as well. And I think there is a reverence that should, not worshiping animals, but certainly having a reverence for what you've grown, what has been killed for you to sustain your life. But again, I love being in Montana because they could do that. I could see how they treated their animals. It made purchasing meats and the produce from the local farmers at the market, one of the easy decisions that we made. Plus the hunting was excellent. I mean, there's nothing better than having really fresh food from hunting trips and stuff too. But, again, what about vegetarian? What about vegan? What about keto? What about the carnivore diet or the paleo diet or all these other eating styles or fads that are out there? So honestly, I think these are great places to start, namely because a lot of them reject some of the conventional wisdom or conventional recommendations that you'll see from certain government agencies that are out there of what is healthy for people. Again, they've overseen the worst health decline in modern history. I mean, over the last 60, 70 years, these agencies have literally watched an entire population become absolutely enamored with really unhealthy foods. And some of that directly comes from the financial and power incentives that these places have put up. So when I also started doing CrossFit, we did a 60-day eating challenge. And so this is one of the things for me that was a huge indicator of eating healthy and why it's so important. So after college, after all this stuff, we got up to Montana. So I was about, I think, 24, 25 years old at the time. We did a 60-day eating challenge with the gym, and I actually gained 10 pounds of pretty solid muscle, and I lost over 5% body fat. Not that I had a ton to begin with, but I remember being under 10%, basically, 6 to 7% body fat, just because I was always constantly going and running, being a sprinter on a collegiate track team. I never had a whole lot of fat on my body for a lot of stuff, but I could never gain the muscle mass that was there. And that comes down to a couple things. One, and the biggest thing, was diet. So when I really started eating really, really clean, and I was at the CrossFit gym doing lifting weights the way that we were, and doing power stuff and doing mobility, making sure we were doing it right and the form was correct. So while I had the proclivity to have fat loss results from, again, years of being a swimmer, the most dramatic change for me was how many that I gained 10 pounds. I remember being told that I needed to gain weight for football. And as much as I tried to go lift weights, I got a lot stronger, but I never could gain the weight that was there. And a lot of it had to do with my food intake. And I just didn't know enough at the time of when to eat the right foods, what type of macronutrients I needed, and why the micronutrients are also important. So I weighed 150 to 155 pounds from my, I think, 8th grade and freshman year of high school, all the way to my first duty station in the Air Force. So we're talking, 12, 13, 14 years old, all the way to 24. So over a 10-year period, I barely gained any weight. And that was through high school. That was all the way through my my college career in track. And, that's 10 years at 155 pounds with football, soccer, track and field, you name it. I wasn't competing for only the last 2 years of that, which is when I was brand new in the Air Force. So once I stopped, I had 2 years in the Air Force before I really got to my first duty station. And I kind of lifted here and there. I'd go play racquetball or whatever, but I certainly didn't do I was done with with sports or whatever else that was kind of tied up, the last thing I wanted to do was go into a gym just because I'd done it for so long. I mean, I wanted to go to the beach. I enjoyed, going and doing plenty of activities and other stuff while, I was in, but I certainly didn't want to do a regulated training regimen or anything like that. So my weight didn't change. And that's what's crazy. My body composition certainly did over those 2 years. So I wasn't taking care of myself. I probably, even though I got pots and pans and I was eating stuff, I was still eating a whole bunch of carbs. I was still going out drinking, doing a lot of that stuff too. Certainly drinking a lot of calories. So I still drank Cokes, sweet tea. And, I'm a Southern kid, so I grew up on sweet tea. So I still enjoyed a lot of that stuff even when I left. And so I didn't really, at that point in time, my metabolism was still really good, but because I was taking a lot of stuff and I wasn't working out the same way that I used to be, my body composition surely changed. So I could tell that some of the muscles I did actually did atrophy a little bit, and that it got a little bit more squishy here and there, even though my body weight didn't really change all that much. So again, my weight didn't change, my body composition did. And I went from competing almost year round to doing kind of absolutely nothing other than going to the beach and partying and having that. So I just kind of coasted along with my metabolism as I gained from, the prime of my athletic career from high school through college. What's crazy is that I tried to gain weight a number of times, whether in high school or college, without understanding proper nutrition. And I also hated lifting weights during this time too, which is another reason why I never really got any faster, in my opinion, for my sprinting career, or why I never gained weight for football, was because I didn't take the weightlifting as seriously as I probably should have. I certainly loved going out and doing practices and sprinting and doing that stuff, but I didn't enjoy doing deadlift or bench press or anything like I do now. I always felt I could be doing something else with my time, especially after 3 hours of a track workout. The last thing I wanted to do was spend another 45 minutes to an hour lifting weights. And that's how I justified it. That habit is certainly one thing that I kind of regret, that I wish I'd understood, taken more seriously at the time. It's how important, especially weightlifting, is for men in general, but also for women. I was lean and strong, but I wasn't nearly as fast, and I wasn't as strong as I probably could have been. That's why it shows a shock to me when I gained 10 to 15 pounds and thinned out in only 60 days of an eating challenge. While I worked out at a CrossFit gym only 3 times a week. I worked out only 3 times a week. I only lifted 3 times a week. There wasn't a whole lot else that I was doing. I would go out and play pickup games of soccer or whatever here and there. But between eating right for 60 days and just working out 3 times a week of doing CrossFit, I gained 10 to 15 pounds. My body, again, I lost about 5% of my body fat, and I gained that much muscle, which was crazy. It was kind of a night and day difference, and it honestly shocked me. And again, it came down to eating the right things and having the right macro portions at the right times, and kind of dialing in the science of eating and lifting. So since then, I've tried other diets at times and restricted other things at certain times, like dairy, meat, sugar, you name it. And I've reintroduced them over a period to kind of pay attention to how it made me feel and what other results it might have, whether I got bloated or whether I got itchy or something like that. And that was certainly some shock when I would actually feel like I was some sort of not just an intolerance, but almost like somewhat of a minor allergic reaction, a mild one. So while vegans, carnivores, paleos, and ketos certainly have very heated debates on the merit of all this stuff, and they endlessly praise the documentaries and the books in cult-like fashion that put this stuff out there. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't look at some of these, just don't buy off on all the hype that's there if you don't have to. The simple conclusion that I came to after looking at all this stuff is this: refined sugar is one of the biggest killers in our country and the Western world. And it's probably responsible for most of the diseases, or at least exacerbating and being a large contributing factor to a lot of different diseases, and providing a plethora of comorbidity issues. So other things that basically make you unhealthy. One of the things I didn't understand about fat was, as the visceral fat that's in your stomach, so not what you see on the outside, but literally the fat that goes around your organs, as that gets bigger and bigger, it can weigh down and start shutting down certain parts of your organs depending on how large. That's why you can see some people who look skinny on the outside, but are actually very, very unhealthy because of where it is. The problem is that is the last place you start losing fat when you do it. So you can see the stuff on the outside, but in order to really target that stuff, you're going to have to change a whole lot of habits in order to make sure that you're taking the weight off of your organs from that. So Whether it's been drinking calories, so going back to the sugar thing, whether it's drinking calories like fruit smoothies that are supposed to be super healthy for you, but again, even if it's healthy for you, if you're still taking in more carbs than you need to be, your body's going to process it the same. Sweet tea, again, I love sweet tea. It is delicious. I don't think I've had sweet tea in over like 2 years or something like that, and that's probably my quota once every 2 years. Or just the sheer amount of sugar and carbohydrates in food items that I used to eat as well. So I think those are the largely responsible for most of the issues people have. It creates the same dopamine effect that some drugs give people, which creates a dependence for many people, and it's a vicious cycle. Yeah, it tastes great. Sugar, fat, all that stuff tastes really good. It really does, make the experience of something. But again, it can be overindulgent. It's something that you have to be aware of. So basically, my eating healthy, when I say that, it simply means that you're cutting out sweets altogether, right? Which is almost difficult for me at times. I have a really huge sweet tooth that's there, and to try to eat whole foods, lean meats, good fats. You probably need more protein than you actually think you do. You probably need to drink twice as much water as you're already drinking right now. Again, I drink about 1 to 2 gallons per day. So basically you need to be drinking about an ounce of water per pound of your body weight. Intermittent fasting or other fasting things I've also tried. I've seen wonderful results for my health and mental clarity, mental acuity, all that stuff. And just energy levels and metabolism really, as my body started to slow down as I've gotten older, those are things that I have drastically noticed that have increased that stuff. Now, I say sweet, so it's not that you're cutting out all the sugars and all the stuff that you're going to be intaking. It just certainly means that, by and large, I think the 80-20 rule basically applies. So as long as you're moderately active and you are 80% of the time eating a lot of right things, healthy foods, whole foods, good fats, lean proteins, you're going to be fine. Probably a lot less pasta than you really need to be. But again, it comes down to this: drink lots of water, stop drinking your calories, avoid sweets at every meal. Again, it's okay. I would probably say for any desserts you might have, probably cut the dessert in half and only have it for dinners once a week or twice a week or something like that. Lean meats, grass-fed if possible. Focus on whole food, raw or slightly cooked. Make sure you're try to get as much nutrient content still in it rather than overcooking it. Also, you can't release some of that stuff. So that's one of the things for raw food. Now, raw food can be really good for you, but just by slightly cooking it, you're actually able to release a lot more and get more impact out of some of that stuff too. Pay attention to flash temperatures of your cooking oil. So that's why you don't want to cook too hot either, because it can destroy the fat molecules that are there. Eat organic produce or locally produced for items that can be dirty from pesticides. So there's like the dirty dozen. So your spinaches, your strawberries, your other berries and stuff, they can have a residue. So make sure you're always washing some of that stuff, especially when you get it from the store. Even if it is organic, you still want to actually wash that stuff when you get it. So it's very basic stuff, but obviously it's very potent for how you can live your life. And it can change a lot of how you feel about yourself, how your body reacts, being able to do it. And again, if it's the fuel for your body, it's also the fuel for your business ventures, which is why I wanted to kind of focus on that for this month and this topic. Now, while I think it's great general advice, I highly recommend taking the time to go a step further in your journey for health and wellness. So get away from all the hype and all the fads that are out there, because everyone is literally distinct from everyone else based on your genetic data. Black people are different from white people. White people are different from Asian people. Asian people from different parts of Asia are also different from other people. In fact, every individual, again, is different than every other individual. Our genes have a lot to say about what we should be eating. And so there are certain diets out there that are even based on your blood type. And I think that's a great step. I would certainly like to see a little bit more research into that idea. But then again, maybe not. Why? Well, go ahead and get your blood drawn. Blood test, whether that would be for allergies or whether that would be for intolerances, can tell you a lot about what you should be eating and what you should be staying away from. And I can tell you what, in some of the cases, it can tell you what you're allergic to, if you don't already know that. I can also tell you what you're really sensitive or intolerant to. So again, I kind of already said that. And the reason why I want to go back to it is because basically intolerances are just subclinical allergies. You're already kind of going down a path of, it's kind of like being pre-diabetic before you get there. It's kind of that transition period that you're not quite diabetic, but you're almost there. Well, you might not be allergic to something, but you're intolerant for some reason. One of the things that I found out when I did that was there's certain health foods that are out there. They're like, this is a superfood. You need to be eating it. Almonds, how great are almonds? Well, it turns out I'm actually intolerant, highly intolerant to almonds. It actually creates chronic inflation for me. And I didn't know that going into it. So even when I was thinking I was eating healthy, the way my body was reacting, it was actually making me more unhealthy. Garlic is one of those other things that are out there too. So even though they're healthy and they were staples for eating the paleo diet, one of the hard things for me was like, I couldn't eat some of that stuff more. So I had to experiment with it. So I took it out of my diet. And guess what? When I reintroduced it, I could feel like a general swelling in my body. Not that I was itchy or anything like that, but it felt bad in my gut and everything too. And so I certainly have gone back and looked at that. I felt like my fingers were, were swelling or whatever too. And so those were some things that I thought would be healthy for me. It turns out because I took my blood test, it wasn't. So where do I stand now with my diet? For one thing, I really focus on not judging other healthy eaters for starters. So the fact is, most of these diets, even though they have very intense debates, they go 80 to 90% of the way in agreement with stuff. They remove processed foods, they remove a whole bunch of sugars and sugary drinks while encouraging to drink more water. So some of the basics that I've already talked about, these, other than little tiny bits of arguments, and they can be huge issues. Again, me being a little bit more of a carnivore, sometimes I literally will just eat meat. It's one of the best feelings I've ever had, eating nothing but red meat for a period of months. And I'll get into that here in a sec. My sister's a vegan. And so our conversation about that is a great conversation that we had in one of the other podcast episodes. And again, 80 to 90%, we're both there, but we have a big disagreement on that last 10%. But that shouldn't stop anybody else from doing the other 80% when it comes down to that. Once you get that 80% dialed in, that's going to give you the majority of the results that you're going to have, just those things that are in agreement. So I like to think of most of the heated debates over the diets as truly kind of a dumb conversation when it is. Even though there might be some significant disagreements, I think they distract, especially for people who are trying to get healthy and trying to learn all this stuff. When you're just taking a gigantic crap on someone else's diet pattern, like if you just say paleo's garbage, keto's garbage, you should be vegan, or vice versa, you're really doing a disservice to all of those things in general, where a person just needs to get healthy. They just need to do the basics that you already agree on anyway. So I don't think it's truly helpful to have those heated conversations about it, even though, or poo-pooing some of the other stuff. Again, I still think it matters more. Like once you get to that 80%, you should really take a look at your blood to see what can get you that next 20% to help you live your healthiest life. So anything that throws your body into a continuous state of inflammation. So again, that was what almonds, and honestly, dairy does that to me as well. So almonds, dairy, and garlic are certain things that I have issues with. Again, who knew that it was those healthy foods that I actually had an issue with? So I also found the intolerance to red meat. And yet, when I transitioned to a carnivore diet, I talked about being 155 pounds. I gained about 10 to 15 pounds here or there. So I was at 165, and I was there for quite a while. And my weight kind of had crept up over time, but I also gotten bigger. I'd gotten a little bit stronger, not the super fit buff guy or anything like that. But we had our third kid, and I'd gotten out of the military. And I will say that there are some mental challenges that I kind of had to go through. And there's some things I mentally had to go deal with. But I did let myself go in some regard. And so while my wife was going through the process of being pregnant and eventually giving birth to our third child, my little girl, I kind of let myself go, to say the least. And so I went from weighing about 165 pounds, 170 pounds on average, I went up to 195 pounds. And that's not because I was yoking it out at the gym, eating nothing but great things. That's because I love milkshakes. I got a huge sweet tooth. Even though milk does not like me, I love milkshakes. Cookies and cream, Chick-fil-A, that's where it's at. I also love strawberry, so delicious. Anyway, and again, I have a sweet tooth. And so I really did let myself go. I didn't have the same military standards of having to go take a PT test or anything else. So again, I really did let myself go. And for a period of about 5 months, I stuck really hardcore to basically when we moved in 2019, July timeframe, we moved from California to Nebraska, where we currently live. So July 2019. So when we got here, I took about 5 months. I basically ate nothing but meat. And so 5 days a week, I would actually skip breakfast. So I would be doing intermittent fasting along with this as well. And I didn't work out more. I just changed the way that I ate my food. I dropped in that period. I went from 195 back down to 165. And so, and right now I fluctuate between 165 and 170. I do lift generally 3 times a week, although that's just to keep it there, but I don't have to watch it nearly as much anymore. But just by switching my diet to do a carnivore diet of eating nothing but steak. And what's interesting is I didn't have the inflammation that I used to have either. That was one of the things that was crazy, was once I was really eating the grass-fed meats and really kind of focusing on that, I didn't have the same issues when I stopped taking dairy with the other meat that was there too. And so I would have salads and fish and some other stuff for dinners. But for my lunch, I basically either had hamburger meats, I had steak, or I had beef liver once a week. And that's basically what it was. It was basically that and salads. And I did it for quite a few months. And, I don't necessarily think that that's always the most sustainable for everybody. I could keep doing it. I just didn't necessarily want to. From a dietary perspective, I had never felt better. I felt fantastic. I didn't feel like I was getting as sick. I mean, it was crazy. So that's one thing that I put out there, and just, you should kind of be a guinea pig for yourself and actually test the things that you're trying to put into place. So that's kind of the effect of what I had from the blood test and kind of how that journey is kind of taking me now. And the rest of the podcast episodes you're going to get are going to be about a lot of the similar topics that are here. And it's going to be a conversation with someone who went through having Guillain-Barre syndrome, basically having your immune system attack your nervous system and go completely paralyzed or almost completely paralyzed, and watching that journey come out of that. And then I wanted to have a general discussion from my perspective, being a kind of more of a carnivore type of person and eating a lot more meats in general, meat and vegetable kind of guy at this point, and having that conversation with my sister, who is a vegan, and getting into her health journey. Because I know a lot of people, whether they're military members, spouses, veterans, dependents, whoever they are, we all have different health journeys that are out there. And I really wanted to dig into some people that I know that have taken your health journey as seriously as I have, but have also taken different paths to get there. So I really hope you enjoy that. The one thing that I would say from my meandering through a lot of these issues, is to really consider finding a place that you can get a good blood test. The one place that I would do, because I really do support what he's doing with his company, always moving forward as a representative of ID Life, is actually getting that blood test. So my first podcast episode guest that I have is Brandon Groney, and he's a representative, like I said, from ID Life. And one of the best things that they have is one of their packages is part of that blood test that will give you a lot of information about what you should or shouldn't be eating and some of the things that you might be more prone to based on your specific DNA. And then I just say, go from there. Read everything you watch. Just take it with a grain of salt and experiment with it. Take things out, add them back, and see how they feel. Again, this is a journey. This isn't just you're not going to change things directly overnight. If you have a specific goal, say what that goal is, and then focus on what daily habits can I have that I can take pleasure in and that I can be thankful for, and falling in love with the process of being healthy in order to kind of get to that goal. So even though you set the goal, I still want you to be focused on falling in love with the journey to get there. And so I went through my journey a little bit, and I interviewed 3 different people on their journey so that you can kind of understand what I mean when I say that. So with that, I'm going to conclude this episode, and I'll talk to you next time when we actually get those interviews out to you. And then next month, we'll be digging into more of the economy, because that's certainly going to be a huge topic going forward, and why I think you need to be focused on not the economy, but your personal economy. All right, take it easy.